Good evening. Welcome to the special board meeting of the Edinburgh Charter School. We're here to speak about the business and finance program about the new school. So before we begin, we're going to go ahead and stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And if the board would recite the mission statement, to inspire passion for lifelong learning, one student at a time. Thank you. If you could do the roll call, please.
Dwayne Degler.
Here.
Stacy Barnum.
Here.
Michelle McCray.
Here.
A.G. Ackentoy.
Here.
Brian Ladman.
Here.
Colleen Preston.
Here.
And Eugene.
Here. Thank you. As there is no public here, however, if there's word comment, it would be strictly related to the presentation tonight. So having said that, we are going to move right along. I am going to turn it over to the representatives from Ecuador and Childs. The board is going to move so that we can see the presentation. So we will get up and get out of the way for a second. Jared, when you're presenting, just make sure you're in this area so they can hear you.
If you want, Matt, I might just point it back, all right?
Okay.
Good evening. So,
It's muted, but it's off. I'm telling you, it's off.
okay. I'll just deal with my echo. So our intention this evening is to accomplish several goals. Initially, we'd like to introduce progress to the board. It's really a continuity of progress from the school-wide master plan, work that was completed in 2020 and 2021. We really last sat with the full board and reviewed this project at the end of June. So tonight we're looking at several potential options or scenarios under which the board could elect to proceed.
Can we figure out what that echo is? Because
I'd
I'm
love
sure
to.
they're hearing
Yeah,
it. I don't know if it's one of your speakers.
I want to be muted.
Click that. How about now? Perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
No worries.
So our intention this evening is reviewing progress, reviewing potential scenarios. There's no intention to make any commitment tonight to move forward with really any allocation of funds. We want to be very deliberate about the potential allocation of funds and taxpayer money to this project. Really, the goal this evening, to a large degree, is allowing the administration to move forward with more specific evaluation of underwriting and financial planning. It's also, I think, important to note that I look at this project in a sense of continuity in the long term of the charter school. Back in 2008, there was something on the order of a 20 million bond furnished that allowed for the rejuvenation of Kemblesville. It allowed for the realignment of Peacedale Road. It paid for connection of sanitary here and many corridor renovations and an initial smaller scope renovation in the auditorium. Then in 2017, there was an additional bond issue that afforded the classroom addition at Kemblesville, as well as the space that we're sitting in now. So I think it's helpful to think about this project as a continuity of capital improvements throughout both campuses. And certainly this is an opportunity to plan for the charter school to prosper into the next 20 years or so. This project also does offer some benefits to traffic to stormwater, things that the school has been challenged with over the years. That's not the specific intention, but because of the manner in which the design is unfolded and the opportunities that the administration has championed to gain some synergies, we've been able to achieve some of that. So Jared and I are going to walk through this evening's presentation. What we anticipate is being back here in March to further discuss scenarios, hopefully have some input from underwriters and financial planning and such. Does that make sense from a goal standpoint? Okay.
So just to lead off, we included this sheet in the overall presentation to help just give a little bit of a summary of the extensive amount of work and information gathered and developed since we last met in June. So in June, we met with the board and reviewed the conceptual design at that point and the overall master plan for that project, and got some direction to move forward in the schematic design, looking at all the campus improvements and looking at a new academic building with the component of the gymnasium included in that. So that's what we set forth with after June. We consulted we contracted with a couple of our consultants to look at the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection aspects, structural, and really the big piece was site civil, looking at the site design as well. So that's one of the big pieces with this campus and the plans we were looking at. So as a team, we developed the documents that we were able to utilize to garner a construction estimate. That was the end goal of the end of the schematic design process, as our design phase, is to get the estimate put together. So we worked with a third-party estimating firm to put that information together, and we'll be able to go through the budget later, and we have even more plethora of detail that they provided to us that's not in here. But basically, to get to that point, we put together architectural drawings of the actual one sheet drawings, similar with the site civil drawings. We got a full MEPFP narrative with some site drawings associated with that, a full structural narrative as part of that as well. So pretty good information to be able to utilize by the estimator in their efforts. So in the project budget, we'll go through that. This little descriptor is there to help you if you're looking at the presentation on its own, to help us explain a little bit of what we've included in this packet, and we'll talk through that as we get to that point in the presentation. As far as the township coordination, I know that's something that was discussed back in June, and something we were concerned with just in general, as we are with any major project. We've met the school administration, ourselves, Riley Riper, Holland Collar Greco, and Site Engineering Concepts met with the township a couple times since June. Initially just to review the project with them, get their feel for it, get an understanding of what their major concerns would be with the project. And at that time, we were understood that the site, as it's a challenging site, already had the water line was a potential concern or issue that we were going to be really tight to it. Had conversations with them about their feelings at the initial meeting, as far as if we got into a situation where we had to move it. And then also had a follow-up just this past week with them with the more refined design, and had a discussion with them as far as overall process, zoning, and sort of any other anticipated processes we'll need to go through. I would say overall, their township seems very supportive of this project. I mean, I think everything we talked about, they're definitely amenable to, and there's obviously the process we have to go through with them, but they're very supportive of everything that we were doing. The next item on here is talking about the zoning, and it's pretty important to understand that this is really a by right project. So we really don't need to go to the zoning board at the township. We're keeping the building height within the zoning requirements. We're not encroaching any setbacks. This project actually, the way we were configuring it, resolves the parking issue that's not a non-conforming issue currently. So we actually sort of address any issues there. We're hopefully we're not really bringing any new ones to light. So as far as just the process of getting approvals, that does help the overall schedule. A couple other items to note in here, the STEM program. So as we were sort of getting near the end of our schematic design phase, there was a discussion with the administration of evaluating the existing STEM modular 600, which the lease renewal is coming up in 2023. And it's a modular that's going to likely need replaced within 10 years as well. And looking at, I believe when we were in June, we were looking at potential options, incorporating options for future additions. And we were requested to look at plans and alternates to be able to incorporate it into the building. What would that look like if that STEM scope became part of this building? And that if it was maybe not an addition in the future, but it was part of the building as the program as we set up forward. So we developed a couple alternate plans that were priced by the construction estimator, and those were included in our budgeting. So we're able to look at that a couple different ways as far as the scope of the project and on the budget side, if the STEM program is in the project or not in the project. The other piece to really bring up is the site location. So I mentioned it just a few moments ago about the water line, and that was really driving our location of our building, was to try to avoid that. And where we ended up getting into was some major issues with grading on site. We had locations with almost 12-foot high retaining walls that were just going to be, you're putting a lot of money in the ground, and not to mention that would really present some issues with our zoning requirements that was going to be challenging. And after our first meeting with the township, they were very open and seemed to express that it'd be a very simple process to relocate the water line. That we moved forward and looked at a few alternate site locations that would have impacts to the water line. As we moved through that, it really ended up being a net savings for the project to be able to put the building over top of the water line, and even have to incur the cost of moving the water line. The savings from all the site work end up being a net savings for the project. So we still show it in the next couple slides in both manners, but at this point, our recommendation really is looking at this alternate site location for that project. So just again, as far as the package goes, this is really the existing conditions that we're looking at here. So just to orient everyone, so State Road is here on page right. And then you have the main parking lot out front of the building, the existing 300 and 400 modular off the side of the building. You have the existing loop road that loops down and around and drops off down at the 600 modular. The other things to note on here were just the sloping hill, that's the high slopes there, the existing stormwater basin that is there, and then the blue line that's coming across is that water line that those existing locations as it is today. So it sort of comes down the edge of the property and then cuts through the middle of it. And then this is what we were looking at in June, as far as the overall location of the building and the overall master plan scope of all the campus improvements. So the modulars 300, 400 would be going away, and there would be a new parking lot that would be implemented. That's project A. Project B is the existing cafeteria, cafeterium modular. That's at the cafeteria level. Whether that is removed or repurposed, that's the determination, but that's that scope outlined. Item C is this outdoor amphitheater. That the intent there for that to be built into the hill and utilize that steep slope to make it a seating area that has a focus to this recreational field quad area. Item E is the suggested relocation of the soccer field. Item D, I skipped over that, is the proposed stormwater basin. So with building this building and all the paving, we have a substantial amount of stormwater that we need to manage on the site. The intent for this project was really to manage all the new construction that we're doing, but as well as there's an existing issue today where there's a large outfall of pipes that come out off the site at this point and code down through the backyards of all the properties to get down to the stream. And we would be trying to capture all of that and redirect that to the stormwater basin as well. So as Matt mentioned, that trying to build in some of these other issues that are occurring at this campus and try to address them as part of this project. Item G is the new academic building and gymnasium. Item H is that the existing maintenance lot, and we'd be paving that and incorporating that into the stormwater management aspect to capture all that area. In item I is the conversion of the existing gymnasium that's in the 1928 building and convert that into expanded seating space for the cafeteria. And then item J is the accessible addition. That would be a Lula that would give you access from the first floor down to the cafeteria level. That was actually a project that was documented in 2019 and to have sort of one file to be able to bid at any time. Based on this site location, that would really be a pretty important piece because that's one of your main routes to the building is from that lower level. So that would be one of your main paths of accessible access to the building would be working your way down to the cafeteria level and then to the new building. Oops, I apologize. One foot back there. So as I said, we looked at a couple options for alternate locations. So our initial budgeting was really based on the building being in this location. But as we went through, we had pricing completed for this alternate location. And so this is what we're proposing here. And the major changes to the overall project really end up being that the water line is relocated and kept to the perimeter of the property. So just makes your whole property more useful. The building would be located sort of at the end of the loop road, and we would extend the loop road down to the building. So that would gain more length for car line drop off, as well as some, you would see some increase in parking down at this area as well. That's the major change, with this building moving up here. The soccer field is still in this general area, but it does actually help the soccer field a lot in that when the soccer field is over the water line, it was, in order to maintain that, there was a lot of fill coming in to build the soccer field to keep it level. So you have to keep all the grade over that. And it actually got to some points where we were very deep to the water line, which is not optimal. In this scheme, it really lets it be, what it wants to be, and does some nice things as well for visual of the field.
I think also just from a campus planning standpoint, shifting the building to the east, reconfiguring it better engages the existing campus. Although these are really they're 10-foot contours, so the topographic lines don't appear very significant because of the graphics, but on the western side of your site, the bottom of the page, that's really quite a lot of slope there. And so positioning the building, we were looking at it there for a variety of reasons, but mainly because of the water line was viewed as sort of a concrete immobile element. But we think that not only does this save a little bit of money from a site standpoint, we think it's just better campus planning for you long term.
So next slide is the actual site engineer's drawings to give you a little bit more reality as to how that would really work out. So, coming off of State Road down the loop road, this, how this parking lot would work out and give you access into the main lot, but also get down into Loop Road. You get some, additional length to the loop as well as the parking. The existing stormwater basin that's there today would be relocated to be a partial underground system, but then also really fed into the new stormwater basin on the corner of the site. The building itself, you sort of see the walkways that are being proposed, and the exact paths, all still need to be massaged out. But what really is nice here, as far as the township was really happy with, as far as fire lane access, emergency access. Previous location that was becoming a challenge of how to, again, because some of the sloping around it, but also how to get vehicles to them. And we had a couple creative solutions that they were involved with coming up with, but this is just much more straightforward. You come down Loop Road, you can go right around the building, you have full access around the building. And then the way the grading works out is sort of nice that it creates a berm that you go down to the soccer field. So it sort of creates a little hill to be able to view. You're up at a higher elevation as you come out the building, and you're sort of up and sort of, a natural hillside to sit on to view games. That was a nice little benefit of that solution. So I just wanted to run through the building. I don't need to get in great detail, but this has changed a little bit, I know, since we've looked at this last. Still the intent that we came into this was with, I think we had 27 classrooms, we had 2 specialty rooms, learning center, like that's part of the educational program, like that's depicted in here. We had some administrative pieces that we were incorporating, and then the gymnasium. Like those are the big picture chunks that we were incorporating in this project. So the way this was formatted, and again, this is all going to have to be revised slightly just based on this new site location. But where we were at previously, this frontage of the building was really your main focus. You were addressing the building that way. So as you came in the main lobby, you had a lobby space with access to the second floor, and then direct access into the gymnasium space, full-size basketball court with bleachers, retractable bleachers in that space, and locker rooms off the back with direct access out to the fields. The administrative space, there's an office space with hoteling offices as well as perimeter offices to sort of be the buffer zone from that very public space as you get into the more classroom wings of the building. So the heading down and into the classroom, one thing we discussed briefly as far as looking at the collaborative spaces and how, especially at Undergrad Charter, when you see throughout the hallways, how all the different types of seating and styles that are offered to the students and like how they're all utilized. And even this space, how those different space types and everybody works a little differently. The thought was to be able to provide that same for variation in this building as well and build it in. And we had built in some collaboration space into our program, but how it evolved as we got into this plan was really to create this more open collaborator space. It was a terminology that was coined, and it really becomes a part of the hallway, but it's really an open space that with using furniture solutions becomes a space that, whether it be classroom breakouts, they can come out and utilize that space, or kids in between periods, or whether they have a period off, they're able to utilize the space. This would be sort of this more open space. On the north wing, we sort of have a different variation where they're more collaboration nooks. So we have these little recessed nooks that are in there, a little bit more small scale, a little bit more intimate type spaces that we were looking to provide. Again, the goal there was just give a variety of types of spaces. The classrooms themselves, we were trying to be flexible with the layout, like as far as pretty much give a standard classroom that could be utilized for any courses that would want to be in there, so that just to be flexible. I guess really the west wing and the north wing differ a little bit in the footprint, but the overall function and square footage and linear footage of it, as far as daylighting, everything, all are consistent across the board. These plans also show that STEM program added. I would say that the location of the STEM or the science program is not. This is not saying where that's going to be. This was how we depicted it on the plan on the end to be able to help price it and say, all right, these 5 rooms on this floor and the 5 rooms above, give us a price without them and with them. So this plan shows it all in with all those pieces in there. So as we would go through the next phase, if that program would be included, we would go through an evaluation of creating the ideal science classroom, make sure we have everything that the school really needs. After going through this, we did get some input back from the science teams of other things we need to incorporate. So we have that list of things to work through as we revise the documents. But largely, this gives you an idea of the footprint of the building. I think everything's we're comfortable with everything really fitting within this footprint as we have it shown. A couple things to note as far as just programmatically, since we met last. A couple things that were added. So the collaboration spaces, I think that grew a little bit just based on how that actually needed to size to function. And then as well as we've incorporated at the administrative side, we have the hoteling offices and a conference room that were part of the original program. But then we have this other larger space that we have designated as a large conference room. And the scale of that room is partly that could be used for trainings, but also like the board, it'd be an appropriate size space for the board to be able to meet there in that room. And then as you move to the second floor, it's a very similar concept to the first floor, the west wing and the north wing. Same concept as far as the collaboration spaces and how they're incorporated. The one thing to note again is the gymnasium space. In reviewing it with a structural engineer, how this volume of the gym and the locker room, what the best way, the most efficient way to build that was really just to incorporate that footprint of the locker room in that 2-story space. And just have it be one structure, so that a very clean rectangular structure around that. What that gave us was another additional square footage that got incorporated in this second floor which we designate as a fitness center above the locker room area. So has potential for access down to the gymnasium from up at that level, but that gives that another space for that function. Is there any questions before? I mean, that's sort of the big picture plans, but I just wondered if there's any questions on that before.
In regards to the second floor and access to the second floor, have you incorporated elevators that would be handicap accessible?
Yes, there is an elevator at the core of the building. So when you first come in the main lobby, there's a sort of open stair that goes up. But once you go back at the very central portion of the building, there's an elevator that will take you up. So just moving through, this is an elevation to sort of give a little highlight of some of the drawings we've created. Big picture, what we're envisioning this being is a combination of materials and elements. And just speaking about the partie of the building, we really have this little jewel of an entry piece. And then we have the classroom wings and the gymnasium. And we've sort of thought about that in the same way of how we're addressing them in elevation. So we have more of a glass entry with a wood canopy overhead. That becomes the entry point. And the classroom wings are a metal, proposing a metal panel with sort of a randomized fenestration system. We've been able to sort of determine a patterning of that every classroom gets about the same amount of daylight in that room, but from the exterior still has a little bit of a randomization look to it. And then at the gymnasium, we would have some glass coming into that as well. And then we're actually proposing a fiber cement panel on that portion of the building, which is similar to material that we used at Campbellsville addition, but utilizing it and doing some coloration differentials to make it a little bit more playful, but keep it very simple construction, but like use an undulation of the material itself to sort of create this playful wave on that building. So now we have a plethora of renderings here. So this is again the view in that original location. Location 1 is as we were calling it. This is like coming up. It's that main entrance, the gymnasium space, classroom wing. This is still showing this is the 600 modular location as it is today. And then moving into the lobby. So we're proposing more of an open lobby space. That wood canopy at the entrance, the idea is for that to drive through the whole space to help tie the inside and outside together. Doing some graphic walls to help tie together some of the goals from the school and branding from the school onto the gymnasium wall and lead you down into the corridors. So these two doors would be taking you into the gymnasium on the right, as well as having some bird's eye views from up in the sort of upper level into the gymnasium from up at that point. This is proposed as another open collaborative space. So as you come up the stairs, you're in sort of a more comfortable zone there. And at the main entrance, we have a greeter station as well as some built-in seating that's incorporated. Then we partner along with Corbett, who has done a fair amount of furniture work at Avon Charter School for classrooms and different spaces, this space included. And we work hand in hand with them to work to put some of these images of our typical spaces together. So this is a proposed typical classroom, what that might look like with some accent paint, how that furniture goes in there. Again, the idea with the classrooms is to be a pretty typical classroom for a large portion of them. Obviously, the science classrooms would be more specialized to that use, but these rooms would be a pretty straightforward and clean design. We have a couple images of the collaborator space, so that open space that the classrooms empty out into. I think this slide and the next one both have some imagery for that, and this one is depicting having it lined with lockers. So the lockers for the building would be sort of located in this area as well. And again, sort of looking at furniture solutions to develop the space. We're looking at building some built elements in there to help organize the space and give displays, and the sort of two different schemes look at different ways of doing that. So that this option is a little bit less built in to give a little bit more flexibility, and some of the more displays are built in as part of the furniture and not as part of the constructed element. Again, just for long-term flexibility to allow the school to change how that space is used. This is an image of one of those collaboration nooks. So this is down near the end of the corridor. So you have sort of this one actually sort of combines it, the one across the hall aligned with it, sort of creates some, again, sort of smaller scale little spaces that you're undercover, a lower ceiling, give some white writing spaces or writing surfaces, just a little bit more of an intimate feel for that use. I have one image of the hoteling space, so that open hoteling office with the private offices around the perimeter of that. Yeah.
So from a budgetary standpoint, what we wanted to do was track with some continuity. No, we just wanted to. We just wanted to be able to track with some continuity. Yeah, I should actually zoom in.
Yeah, I would have just exit out of there.
We wanted to track with some continuity what we had looked at with June and where we are today. So we really have kind of two different ways of looking at budget. This is simply comparing what we had looked at back in June to where we are now in sort of an apples and apples condition. And then our adjacent or next budget is really looking at some different potential scenarios that would be worth considering in different fashions to move forward. So back in June, the budget evaluation was, we collectively know of the need to replace the modulars. So looking at, in this case, we looked at option one, which was essentially a modular replacement project. Option two was an addition to the existing school as simply a classroom building addition. Option two was, we had two different options for that. We had three different schemes. We had scheme A and scheme B and C. So scheme A was an addition, just classrooms. Scheme B and C was a new building, just classrooms. And then option three was a new building with classrooms and gymnasium. And that was the direction that the board asked us to proceed. Just as a reminder, from the modular approach, there's additional cost to that in terms of life cycle of lease costs, of life cycle replacement costs after 20 years, et cetera, that any hard construction doesn't bear. And in all these scenarios, we carry project contingency and construction contingency and such. We also were quantifying some below the line numbers associated with additional enrollment revenue, with the expectation that in a bricks and mortar construction versus modular, there would be an enhancement to a small extent of student population. Back then, we were just carrying 100 students in dialogue with the administration of a parent pool. So what we essentially have done is, based on some of the adds that we added to the project of the fitness area, that large meeting room, essentially just growing the square footage based on programming discussions with the administration, and also adding in an escalation, because back in June we were trying to work in 2021 dollars, and there's an escalation now included, anticipating a construction start down the road. So from an apples to apples standpoint, the new building with gymnasium adjusted was a sort of $29 to $36 million range. Where we had landed from a schematic design standpoint, based on additional detail and such, was around 38 million. This is sort of an apples to apples comparison. So the actual budget for a new building with with classrooms and gymnasium, with the new site plan, landed with the detail that we've gone through with mechanical engineering and site planning and input from the township and such. Essentially, we're landing at a little bit less, because we're saving about $500,000 by moving the water line and reconfiguring the building. So this is all a bit of abstract math. We have some scenarios that show what this looks like in terms of site plan. But essentially what we've sort of arrived at as sort of food for thought as potentials is a scenario A, which is the new building, gymnasium, classrooms, no science labs, not a replacement of the 600 modular. Scenario B, which adds the science to the project. And then scenario C, which is really all the master plan improvements, kind of like an all-in scenario. I would also note that as you look at the budgets for these, there's a healthy amount of contingency. So we probably know from media coverage and such that a lot has happened in the last year to construction costs and escalation and what have you. All these budgets, whichever scenario we look at, they all are carrying a 10% construction contingency. They're all carrying escalation costs, and they're all carrying on top of that a project contingency. So as a for instance, if we look at the middle of the road option, scenario B, which is new building, new classrooms, gymnasium, and science labs. In that scenario, we're carrying 3.1 million in construction contingency, 2.5 million in escalation costs, and also 2.2 million in project contingency. So you add all of that up, and in a $47 million budget, you have $8 million of contingency. It's about 17%. It's arguably a lot, and yet I think it's important to note when we're in schematic design, which has a whole heck of a lot more detail than we did last summer, but it's still early in the design and documentation and engineering process. We're expecting that we're including in contingency because we expect to use it. Having said that, as we started out tonight's discussion, this project was really paid for by contingency that wasn't used over at Kemblesville. Some of the other infrastructural projects that occurred years ago was the same sort of scenario from the original budget. So, we include contingency in a project because we expect to use it. But as we work through the project, we reduce that contingency. And I'd also say that the project contingency in particular, as opposed to escalation and construction, project contingency is intended to accommodate for things like if you have to do road widening or if you have to add a stoplight or that sort of thing. It's been very favorable, the dialogue that's occurred with the township thus far, in terms of the approval process as well as the potential requirements. So
I think the one thing that we tried to include on this page as well, because I think it really applies to scenario A specifically, is that STEM modular cost. I think that's important to understand. If the scenario A is the path that is one to look and be investigated, that the STEM modular is going to be replaced in a short term. So what is that cost? So we have an estimated cost in here for what that potentially could be, and that's. So we garnered some input from Mobile East, who's the one vendor that has put in a couple of the modulars here, or has done the 500 modular. And the one thing they've said to us recently is they assisted us with our original budgeting. It's just that the rates have been skyrocketing for their lease rates. So they basically, we've added some escalation to determine what that rate increase might be. That's 10 years from now when that would start. So it's really hard to figure out what that would be. But even now, I believe they're at $22,000 a month. Whereas I think for the STEM modular, you're paying $66,000 a year. So it's just pretty substantial increases from what the current school is currently experiencing as far as those go.
And the STEM modular historically was a less expensive lease because it was a used modular when the charter school installed it. So the next few pages show in better terms those three scenarios.
Right. So looking. All these scenarios are locating the building and relocating the water line, and that again sort of our recommendation after we got the pricing back and continue discussion with the township. I think that is the most logical approach. So scenario A is that footprint of the building. Yeah, it's such as easy to do.
Okay.
So the building does not have the STEM footprint included in it. It is still doing the water line. The loop road would still be extended. The parking would still be done at the front entrance, and the parking at the maintenance area and the stormwater, addressing the stormwater issue would still be completed. The gym would be still converted because you have building a new gym, so that space could be utilized better, which would allow for the modular that's currently the cafeteria expansion airspace to be repurposed. So that's really the scope of that project that's identified. So the amphitheater, the rec area, the quad area, the soccer field, all those pieces really aren't incorporated into that scope. Scenario B is very similar as far as the overall scope of the site. All the campus improvements are the same. The big change is that we incorporated the STEM program into our building footprint. So that's showing that there, and then the 600 modular would be removed, and that would be returned to the green space on the campus. And then scenario C, as Matt said, it's sort of the all-in campus improvements. So everything that we reviewed earlier, as far as the parking, the new gym, the accessibility Lula, the cafetorium modular, the paved area down below, amphitheater, all those elements would be incorporated and included in the project. So that's sort of the all-in budget for all those pieces that were identified.
Just a quick question. When you go back to this A and B, can you just help me understand like what happens to the field and the rest of those things? Like, are those additional costs that we have to incur
Correct. So as the scenarios that we outlined here, that
Sure.
yes.
Could you just repeat the question, because they probably did not.
Oh, yeah. So the question was what was happened in scenario A, and B, what happened in the soccer fields and some of those other pieces, if there would be additional costs that they would be incurred if those would need to be built. And the answer is yes. So as we outlined the way we constructed the budget, we sort of have line items for all these projects to sort of help understand approximate costs that they might garner. So the soccer field's on here, and again, it sort of varies per location again too, like location 1 versus location 2. So some of these all are, again, they're all estimates at schematic design level. I guess the best way to state that. So there is an additional cost. So there's there's nothing to say that any number of scenarios could be developed. There could be scenario A1 or A2 or DEF, however we want to do it. That could be variations on that. That might be the scope plus the soccer field to understand what it can be. Those are all viable approaches. But generally in this scheme, if we did just as it's shown, it would be, the field, this would be graded out, it'd be grass, but it wouldn't be graded to be a nice flat, regulation soccer field. Any other questions? And the last page of what we included as part of the budget portion is really just some additional information that might be helpful in just the overall evaluation of the project. Looking first just at the enrollment potentials. What we targeted when we started this project was adding 100 students, and using that parameter based on the existing student population, we figured out, all right, how many classrooms do we need? And so when we actually went back and said, all right, well, this is how many classrooms we need. If we put 24 kids in all these classrooms, it actually gives us 116 students. So that was the number we targeted. So this chart below really goes through the current population, the planned population, and then the max population. And really, that's not saying that that's the intent, but really the available space. Obviously, if you're building a building of this magnitude and cost, you want to make sure you're building this for the future as well, that you're not going to be 2 years down the road maxed out. So we're planning for 100 students. What we have has 100 capacity for 116 at the ideal classroom size. If you increase it to 28 students per classroom, that's what we're calling the maximum size. So there is potential space for more growth within the building if the classroom sizes get larger. It's very nuanced, but there are even more opportunities in the building the way it's configured now to even have more, to tweak that even further, as there are a couple, specialty rooms that are there that if they're able to be repurposed in other types of rooms, you can be used as classrooms. There's a lot of different nuances you can get into, but big picture, this is right now what's very easily built in and understandable. So at the top here, this is really just looking at what our planned. It was 116, looking at the potential added enrollment based off of the 2021, 2022 average revenue with no escalation applied. To look at the maximum, we really looked at, so this is if we did the building as planned with no STEM. It's the 116 and 224. If we incorporate the STEM, in what we've actually added 10 science rooms, which is more than what exists in the STEM today. So that just also by default adds potential for more students to be in the building. So again, if we look at the whole building and putting 24 students in all the rooms, but really 28 in the science rooms, which was what we were indicated is the reality today, that really puts at 158 additional students, or if we max out all the rooms at 28, then that's the 266. So that's really where this maximum number came from, was if we do the STEM and we max out every classroom, what that potential additional enrollment would be. The other factors to be considered, there are a number of capital projects that were identified as part of our campus-wide evaluation. And a lot of them, there are quite a few of them that are able to be incorporated and absorbed into this project. The stormwater management we discussed before, just regrading the soccer field to make it a regulation field, the accessibility of the cafeteria level, the paving behind the 1928 building, there's water pooling, the pastures, taking the playground out, relocating the swings, and then the modular replacements. So all those pieces are all items that would be absorbed into this project, or costs that wouldn't be down the road, but they'd be taken care of as part of this project potentially. And then the last piece is really just a few pieces that we pulled out of the estimate, as far as we asked them, all right, well, I know at the beginning of the project, the gym was a debate a little bit of was that included or not. And what would the cost, since it's a pretty standalone element as far as the structure goes, like what would the cost be if we just don't do the gym? So that's a rough idea of what the savings could be if we don't do that. If we remove those large collaborator spaces, what would the savings be if we don't go that path? Same with the fitness center. If we don't do the fitness center, what would the potential savings be? These are, that's just sort of food for thought as far as thinking about potential alternatives to the design as far as cost savings for the project. So we wanted to sort of start a list of that and start putting some of those pieces out there.
Question, is there, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I have a loud voice, so. Any considerations of what potential cost savings would be with just having a new building that's more energy efficient based upon we have all these modulars, they're clearly not efficient for heating and cooling. Is there anything that we can project where they could potentially be cost savings for the school, or would it sort of equal out?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can talk. The question was the potential really utility cost savings over a 20-year life cycle by having a more traditional bricks and mortar building that has a modern HVAC system, rather than modular units that are essentially using heat pumps that are not particularly efficient for what they're doing. That are also, modulars are temporary buildings and are subject to different energy code requirements versus a building like this being built in 2024, 2025. It would have continuous insulation and would have modern HVAC systems and such. So we haven't quantified that. We can talk to the mechanical engineer, but I mean, it is a valid point. It's another, insofar as there's additional.
I don't think you'd get much savings because it would be offset by the size of that building. I mean, what you
Well,
might
that's-
say that you're going to spend
Because we're increasing the square footage.
and
That's
the
fair.
whole gymnasium.
The gymnasium piece, I think the other aspect would be probably a little bit, but I think the gymnasium we lose it.
I think, one of my questions was any consideration for, green spaces where you really are recognizing not only is it more energy efficient, but potentially over time, only because this is a long-term plan and not a temporary solution, that would we realize some of the, would it be more energy efficient and all of those. But again, having one big open space with big windows, we know
Is there any, maybe to take that step further, is there options? And we don't have to discuss them now, but would there be options for like solar or something to help offset with, because you can get funding and stuff, but we don't need. Sure.
Question of Donna. With the all-in project, do you think the bonding solution would be feasible or not feasible?
So can we hold that for Donna? Can we hold that, let them get through it?
Okay,
And then we're all gonna come back and we'll talk about funding and stuff.
Yeah.
I want to ask that question, but can you hold that for a second, Donna? Thanks.
So just to, this is in here, just it's somewhat informative, and really as far as just understanding the project team and how moving forward, how we have been working, and how we've been moving forward potentially. So, we've really been acting as project managers as well as architects for the school, and we have this consistent with the way we've been operating over our relationship. So right now we have Schiller Hirsch, Providence Engineering, and Becker Frondorf working with us as our design team. We've been working with the site civil engineer who they'll be really technically contracted directly to the school, but they're sort of part of our project team, as well as we have an environmental engineer working on the sanitary and water line realignment. And then we have all these sort of other elements that are identified as potential players that might need to come along as well. We know we're gonna need a geotech engineer. We know we're gonna need surveyors, but there's potentials for audio, video, teledata, security, for all of those to be incorporated as well. That's sort of important to understand as far as we start getting into proposals, going through the next design phases, just the overall organization of the project team. And then the last piece we have really in here is the project schedule. So the final slide actually has all the detail, and there's a lot in there that if you care to look into it, I encourage you to do so. But this is at least sort of the highlights of it. And I think, what we were trying to do here was really highlight all the points that we anticipate at a minimum being with the board to be reviewing the project status of the project and opportunities for the board to make decisions, definitely milestone points for decision making. So we completed our schematic design phase. We're here tonight. And as Matt stated at the beginning, the goal out of this would hopefully be for Donna to be able to move forward with underwriter assessment. The potential that we were looking at was, if we're able to come back in March, if the information is all here and ready to go, that we could potentially move forward with design development. For us to do that, we would need some decisions on, what level of scenario are we looking at for design development. I think it's important to note that that's not deciding what's going to be built. That's just really what's deciding what's going to be designed to that next level. Our intent would be to sort of go through a similar process where we went through schematic design. We would go through the design development process with our design team, develop more detailed drawings, and then have another estimate completed on those drawings. So we'd have another checkpoint to be able to say, here's where the numbers are all coming in, and then that we could use that to refine further for what actually be built. The one caveat with that would be whatever decision we come through there would also be what we're deciding to go to the township with. So this is starting design development, but at the end of design development, we would be submitting to the township potentially for that to start that township approval process. So that's identified here in the blue. As far as the overall project, the township approvals and conservation district approvals, that's the critical path typically, and that's carries here in this project as well. So once we get that project process started, we have multiple meetings to go review with the township. It goes to the conservation district to get them approval. And that's really how we had this all aligned, is once we get that approval, then we can put all these documents out for public bid. So this would be a multi-prime public bid project in Pennsylvania. So there's a process there that we would go through for bidding. And again, it's a substantial project, so we want to make sure we give ample time for them to be able to evaluate the documents and put together quality bids. The one benefit I think where we are right now is that we aren't crunched on time. I don't know if we want to say that we have all this ample time in the world, but we aren't crunched. We have the appropriate time to be able to do everything the appropriate way in an efficient manner. Looking at if we are able to start in March of 23, that's a really nice time of year to start construction. That gives us time to do pre-construction. They can come out, start doing some site work, and then they can really go gung-ho once students are out, honestly, that summer and go really hog wild on the site. So there are some benefits there. I think our overall construction window is healthy, and it's nice that it will benefit the school long-term as far as costs. You give them a constrained construction schedule, costs are going to increase. So we can give them ample time to do the project, and you'll see the savings. So that's reflected here as well. And then the last piece, we're showing this open in fall of 2025. The intent really would be for the building to be done in like the spring of 2025. There's a lot of pieces that can't be completed until that last summer, like the modulars can't go away until the building's ready. So the building would be ready. Then that last summer, the modulars would all go away and all that site work that's associated with them would be occurring then. So there's a lot of work that will be happening right up to school, I'm sure. But the hope is that the building would be completed in the spring, giving the school ample time to be able to move in and occupy the occupied space before students arrive. And as I said, this is sort of the extra level of detail that generated that summary, but that's sort of the highlights of that summary.
Does anyone want to see a slide before we go back to ask questions? You can always leave it up and we can kind of print our next. All right, so if we're going to move back, so then we can ask you back questions.
Sure, yeah.
And I'd ask you guys to stay up here because of the microphone, so we can get your chairs or something. Or we can squeeze down and you can.
A long week. Only Thursday.
Oh, sorry.
You.
Spot that? You would go first, huh?
First, we'll go back to Jean's question. Thank you for waiting for that. Jean asked Donna about the bond and what your thoughts are. So we'll start.
Okay, so the first thing we need to do, I mean, we've been looking at this and we've been setting ourselves up for a good cash position, and the board has been very good about committing funds each June for a future expansion and capital improvement. So that number has been growing. So when we originally started talking about this, we were looking to save a good portion of what some of this would cost. So as we move into financial planning, and that would be the next step, to bring in a financial advisor, we would work and run the models, and we would run the models for all scenarios to verify, you know, the school's position, as well as what our rating would be, confirm that we would be in investments, keep our investment grade rating, and, you know, see what the position would be. There's no escalation currently in the student rates. So that's also an important piece, because right now it's not going to stay fixed for the next 30 years. We're going to be looking at increases for those students. So my recommendation would be that we move forward with a financial advisor. 2 RFPs have been prepared for the finance committee tomorrow to review, so that we can send those out and get some applicants in so that we can look at them. I have some recommendations, and I will be reaching out to them directly. Along with that, we would need to look at the underwriters. So I'm not sure what the scenario is going to play out, to be honest with you, Jean, but I think we need to have somebody come in and help us do those financial models and see what's in the best interest of the school.
That's what we did when we, or Kendallsville and did the addition.
Right.
You said we had savings. Do you know, or Deji, do you know where we are with that savings?
The committed funds about 4 million.
So we have about 4 million.
Correct. I mean, we have projects this summer, the ventilation project, as well as the Campbellsville parking lot in front of the school. That's what we're currently looking to budget for capital improvements for this summer. But the board normally commits whatever we know what those costs are. The board normally commits in June, whatever that fund would be. So as we move closer to the end of the year, we'll know what that commitment number is. We'll also know where we are with our capital budget.
Thank you, Donna.
I have a similar question, but it sort of goes into with just the concerns with charter school funding reform. We don't know where we're going. You know, a new governor will come into Pennsylvania. We don't know what the impact on charter reform will be. Are we set up where we would have advisement with a financial planner that really is aware of that contingency? Because I think that's one of the big concerns I have is we don't know what that future looks like. It is nebulous right now. We've heard a lot of scenarios of what that might look like. So I think I am concerned that we have the right advisor who understands the political climate that we're in And that those numbers may look what they are now, but they could take ups and downs where that really, those projections of how much we're student per student that we would be bringing in can dramatically change for us. And I think that is a huge factor because as a charter school, we don't have the ability to levy taxes to make changes. So we're really fixed in the amount of money we can spend. So I guess my question is sort of that process and what we would be considering regarding that to help us plan.
I'd like to release the RFPs to the board. I wanted to share them with the finance committee tomorrow morning. And part of the criteria in the RFP is their experience with charter schools in Pennsylvania and what they, the amount of bonds, the number of bonds that they have worked with to secure for various charter schools. So that is part of the criteria. And also part of the criteria is we're going to looking at their successes and their failures. We want to see exactly what their experience has been. Back in 2008 and 9, when things started to go down, charter schools were impacted in 2010, 11. So we were very fortunate that our financial advisor looked forward, and we also had a lot of expertise on the board to run those models and validate them. So we will make sure that that criteria is in there, and we're going to look at their previous experience.
Maybe it's an answer, it's a question either for Donna or Kristen. The increase in the number of students from our charter renewal, does that play effect next year, or that's only once?
It wouldn't play effect into those numbers.
No, but when are you, so we projected that we could have additional students.
Right.
Is there any plan for those to start next year, or is it all waiting for the new building and more room?
We'd have to wait for the new building.
Okay, that's what,
You want to repeat that? I don't know if they can hear.
Kristen said we'd have to wait for the new building. We don't have the room.
I have a question regarding, this goes back to the architects. I think one of my concern with that collaboratory space is sound. Just because if you have a lot of students and, even classroom pullouts, the noise level I know in this building, we're isolated in this room. But noise and what kind of products, because I'm sure that drives the cost because you have to have sound. Collaborative spaces are still what students are looking for. That's how we prepare them to be learners, to work in teams, and to prepare them for careers. What I know that was one of the out items of let's not consider that, and I'm certainly in favor of those spaces, but what kind of things, are there any adaptations, and are there spaces that we can see of where something that we can see how it works someplace else? Because I think it's a wonderful investment, but if there's concerns of, is it going to be used and how it's going to be used? Because I know that's a concern in these hall corridors right now, because you can't use those spaces probably to the max of like how they would like to use them here.
That's a good question. So I think just in general for the design of space, we would be utilizing some elements to help, address the sound, knowing that that's going to be an issue. It's a corridor too, it's a hallway, so there'll always be a lot of people in them. So that definitely is a concern, and that was something we did bring up when we spoke with various groups and teams as far as teachers, to how would this space be used? Would it be used?
Yeah.
And that even how the classrooms address that outdoor space, because they want to really be focused on them and have it sort of be like you open up a garage door and that's part of your classroom. Would that be utilized? And it really came down to the what we're showing currently, which is more of this traditional some storefront glazing, so you have visibility, but you have that separation to that space.
So Casey, if you look at the picture there, the classrooms actually have walls with windows. They can see the kids in the space, but they can't hear the kids in the space.
Similar to like a lot of office spaces that have the open
Precisely.
concepts in the middle with your
Right.
lining of it.
And
But also some of those other barriers are sound barriers and they're absorbing sound. And
Yes. And then we do have some precedent schools that have a similar similar attempts. A lot of them did have a lot more open, you opened up the wall and it was a lot more open. And I think that was a lot very early ed, but it was a lot of that. That's we saw that in. I think the challenge in our concern here was just again sound, and then also again it would be utilized. I mean, it would look like an amazing space. Really be able to just architecturally speaking, it'd be a fantastic space, but functionally, was it really worthwhile for that investment if it was not going to be utilized? If it's going to always be closed, why pay to make this thing partition? So
Right. And we also, I mean, we typically engage an acoustic consultant whenever we have atypical spaces, just to provide input and oversight and make certain that what's getting built is consistent with meeting the acoustic needs of the space.
I believe we did note that. I think I did touch on that. That was actually something that we included on our team as well. Acoustic engineer, primarily as it becomes pertinent to classrooms too, like really the acoustics within a classroom. There's a lot of studies on that as far as like, there's optimal ranges for that. As far as for kids in the back, kids in the front, you know, how they're really going to work in those spaces. So,
Kids with different abilities as far as hearing as well. I guess I have one other question. I'm sorry.
No, we all have, you're fine. Don't ask about solar.
I'm not asking about
No.
solar. I like green buildings. So I guess one of the questions and one of the options is about obviously the STEM and the science buildings. Is there consideration, do you often consult with, I know we've surveyed and asked what the current teachers would like and people who are teaching, but looking at, are we where science learning is going? Because science learning is very different. It's changed obviously from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago of what was really in those spaces. Are there outside consultants of what really educational consultants that work with school architects of what is the future of what that's going to look like? You know, we're using computerized design. Now that's not chemistry, but for other things, it's not the typical old lab spaces that many of us are familiar with. How do you get that information beyond your stakeholder input?
I mean, to some extent, it's input that we're sort of generalizing across different sort of schools, private schools, public school districts. So there's a certain amount of just our experience across projects. You know, we could potentially engage a lab planner who could give us input in terms of best practices and such to give the faculty stakeholders some additional feedback and considerations.
And I just know they're very expensive spaces, period. So
They
to
are.
me, a lot of the
Because they're
consideration
loaded
is,
with extra electrical and extra plumbing and all that.
okay, thank you.
So my question is more around, and can you bring up the one slide that shows everything?
the site plan, like.
Yes, please, thank you. So has any thought gone in, because we know we have already problems with traffic and getting people in and out and around safely and all this stuff. And I know the township loves us. The police love us. So has there been any, and I don't know if it's a traffic study, what it is that how much we gain from this, especially looking at, okay, we gain this and this is great today, but should we add, and I think your max was 266 kids, you know, potentially 266 more cars coming through, what that does and how this impacts us. Not to mention, when you said if this moves forward, I think what you said, so we would have construction on this building going on mid 2024.
Right.
So, and I'm going to assume,
The logistics.
yeah, because I'm going to assume those trucks and those guys are going to want to come in here.
Yeah.
So, you know, and we don't, you may not know those answers today, and that's okay, but I'm looking forward to, there's a bigger piece of this getting in and out, you know.
Township's exact words was, did you double it?
Yeah,
Did they not
he
give
was,
us
yeah,
their-
he was, see, you doubled the amount, right? It's like, no, it's, you know, it's right now, we're, you know, you're adding maybe 15 more cars to the car line,
Yeah,
which that, I mean, that is huge as far as just like, that's a lot of capacity we're adding.
I mean,
I mean,
it's-
the other thing that we have not really gotten into looking at, and actually I want to go to the Dan's plan because his is more accurate as far as the site plan goes. You know, there's right now, this is sort of its own little lot over here.
Yep.
Whether that could be incorporated in sort of the pathway of drop off, that's, you know, we would need to evaluate that because there's potentials for, you know, all that added length. Does this somehow get involved? Can you double load things like, you know, and I know Kemmelsville got creative with the parking lot to be able to
Yeah.
stack up the lot and wait it because it was more for pickup, right? Because everybody comes early to pick up, stack a lot for pickup. Drop off moves fairly quickly. It's more so, I think, in that aspect. So maybe there's potential solutions there as well.
And are you still planning, and you may not know, I'm asking Kristen Bishop,
Yeah,
pick up and drop off along there?
That's up to-
that was the plan to have that. I mean, we're looking at buses too, but senior parking, like right now, we can't even park all our seniors at the
That's the
school.
question.
And we
No.
have kids walking down State Road, which is,
But would it make,
but yeah, so there's conversations around, we'll obviously continuing to do the loop road.
yeah.
But then, how many cars are we actually talking, how much bigger can we fit cars into that loop road?
And does it make sense, and just a thought, drop kids here so they're not walking through a parking lot? So other
Right.
things you guys,
Right, but.
all questions.
Right, exactly, but that is on the list.
I mean, there's like a lot of, even like for double stack,
It's okay.
you can almost double stack the whole road now that you have another way out. So
Yeah.
from like this exit point, you could double park people the whole way down through that.
We should double your car length.
Yeah, and that's fine. What I don't want to do is whatever we build, if we build, end up with, we can't get to it, and it becomes. And then,
And there will be a need, there was some debate in terms of the technical requirement for traffic study, given the scope of the project, but I think there'll be a need for at least some extent of traffic study, so that can be part of that.
that's great, yeah.
That's what we had done with.
Yeah, I mean, what would be great is we win $1 billion lottery and we put like another access road out front.
We are taking donors.
We're taking donors, yeah. Hello out there, you're listening. I guess my last question, and I'll have Deji and Donna come on. So let's say we move forward and the board decides on whichever one they pick, but let's go the most expensive because that's the one. How do you feel about the repayment and the time? Do you feel, based on what you know today, if everything was approved and moved forward, the bond and all this stuff, you feel comfortable with a $50 million, $25 million? No.
No, my answer to the question is you can't answer that question yet.
Okay, that's, well, that's,
Thank you,
that's
Daisy.
a good
Wait.
question. That's fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think I touched on your
Yeah,
question.
that's where the experts come in.
Okay, that's
Right.
fine. I just wanted to know what your,
We don't know what we don't know.
well, that's the other part.
Exactly. And it's the market. So we're going to the market and we don't know what the bond market will be like.
The
So
market's
there's-
going down.
There's so many
Today.
variables here, and that's why we need to bring in, and the analysis will go from the time we engage them till the time we actually close, we go to market. So
Do you have an estimated cost on what that's gonna be?
What would be?
Like the advisors and stuff, just to find out? Do we have a budget of what we think is gonna spend?
it depends.
Yeah,
It
it does.
depends on. So
Give me a ballpark.
all in, if the budget is approved and we move forward and we start now and we go to market,
Mhm.
it could be anywhere from $40,000 to $45,000.
So the high water mark was like 45,000.
Oh, okay, so it's not, okay.
Not millions.
Well, yeah, thank you.
No.
I
But
want to
if
know
we
how many
phase
zeros.
it, if we phase it to do a preliminary financial analysis with models, you're looking at far less. So, and that would be my recommendation, is to find the appropriate and the right financial advisor and have them work with us, run the numbers, look at our history, look at our rating, look at the debt service. And our debt service, I mean, we have not missed since the inception of our original bond. And we're the only charter school in Pennsylvania that went from non-investment to investment in 5 years. So we have a very good track record, but we also need to be very disciplined as we move through this. And that'll be the hardest, the biggest challenge here is remaining disciplined in what we need to do to set up the finances and what we need to do with regard to looking at costs and making sure that we total on, do what we need to do to get whatever building the board decides, if the board decides to move in that direction.
So tonight, you're basically looking forward for an approval just to move forward and see what we can do.
Can you pull the
Looking-
timeline up real quick, just so.
You're not looking for which building, you're just looking for,
I'm looking to reach out for a financial advisor to come in, and we're gonna look at all scenarios. I think it's important that we consider all of them and we have their report come back with their recommendations and findings. I also think it's important that we start reaching out to underwriters, start having them come in, start those initial dialogue. There will be some coordination and collaboration with the financial advisor and the underwriters. And then the last time we did this, we had the underwriters in to do a presentation to the board. We had criteria the board scored, and then based on the board's assessment of the three candidates, then the board determined by score who was the best underwriter for the school. And then with that, we would hold, we wouldn't be able to move forward until the board actually made a decision on which option, if they were going to choose an option. So I would say that we need to move, we need to get some financial information to the board. We need to get the underwriters in, we need to get them, in front of the board, so you have an opportunity to meet them, talk about the market. There's a lot of questions, it's ever changing. But we need to start that process now so we can at least get it moving. Underwriters, there'll be no cost with that because they're in here and they're trying to secure our business. With regards to the financial advisor, there'll be minimal cost. I wouldn't think it would be more than 5,000 for the preliminary financials.
And
Do you
you're
agree?
not committing to a model, but you
Nope.
have to pick
Yeah.
a model for them to do the underwriting and the financial advisor, because they have to go with a number.
Yeah, I said to Don, like, a couple things. First, my recommendation is like what Donna has mentioned, right? Like, regardless of what option we're going to go with, we're going to have to bring these people in to do the models anyway. So that'd be my recommendation to the board. Two, Donna and I will probably talk about this more tomorrow, but like, if you get the underwriter to look or the financial advisor to look at the highest model, then you know that you can support all the other models underneath, which then enables us to make a broader decision of like, what direction do we go in first now? That's what figures for them.
So,
Thanks, AG.
any more questions?
The only thing I wanted to just
Yeah.
bring up real quick is the design development. Do you want to talk, Jared, just about that process after the underwriter, what that would look like?
Yeah, so when we developed the schedule, there was some hope that if we came back in March, that we might be in a position to move forward, get approval to move forward at that time, and move into design development. We provided our proposal to Donna for those services, and the site civil engineer he either did or is providing them based on the township meeting yesterday. So we have a rough idea on those overall deals. So the way the schedule is built would be at that point, if we got approval to move forward into design development. And as I said earlier, that'd be design development with then also land development included. That fee for that would be all in for that element. It's not the construction document aspect of it, but whatever the bid documents are going to be, but that would be going in for the township for say we chose the all in to go forward with design development phase. That's what would be submitted to township being all in. Doesn't mean all in has to be built. It'd just be you'd be getting land development approvals for the all in contract, which if there's a desire to split that up and do different things, that's the case. We're gonna work through the design development phase and then again do a budget update and come back to the board. Potentially, I think we had a target around August to review the updated budget for the design development, which that is sort of the last opportunity to decide what the scope of the project is going to be. I think the only really big decision that we would need to move into design development is if the STEM program is in the project or not. I think there's the way we show it on the plan at the end of the building is not really what's the limit. I think it's going to want to be massaging the building better, and this would be better integrated, and that's a pretty big piece to like try to hold off as an alternate. So that would be the one piece we need decision on. And I think the other thing we discussed we would recommend moving forward with a site survey at this time. Right now, site surveyors are on a delay for some reason, but it's a pretty long lead to get them to come do things. So it would be something worthwhile having them come out and start surveying it. No matter what option we go with, we need a site survey as part of the site. So unless there's a desire not to move forward with the project in total, I'd say that's warranted to go ahead and move forward sort of sooner than later. That would be before the March meeting. What was the surveyor is around $15,000.
You like to make a motion?
Happy to, if you like me to.
I think somebody's got it. You could say it better.
Yeah, so I would motion that we proceed with both the site surveyor and the financial advisor, or inquiring with the financial advisor or the financials for the process of building the new building.
Which the all in.
The all-in, correct?
Yes, with the intent of the all.
Correct.
I'd second it.
All right. So we have a second. And again, just to restate, this is to do a site survey, engage with a financial advisor with the intent of seeing if we're able to build the all-in C.
Scenario.
See it.
Scenario C for the Avangard charge. So I have a first, I have a second. Any further?
Stacy's not
Oh,
happy.
I'm sorry.
There was also mention of an underwriter. Do you want to get that into this current motion, Donna, or is that later?
Yeah, I'm just looking to reach out to prospective underwriters and
Okay,
have
and
them.
underwrite.
Okay, yeah. I assume that there's no cost to that, so that's why I was like.
Okay, that's fine. If you're
Yeah.
comfortable, if she has the authority to do that without
Yeah.
Yeah.
board motion, that's fine.
Yeah, there's no, sorry.
Yep, okay.
But we'll put that in. So site survey, financial advisors,
And underwriting.
and underwriters for the scenario C. Great. I have a first, I have a second still, Gene?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion, question, or comment from the peanut gallery out there? Just checking.
I just want to say that I think the all-in scenario C makes the most sense to get spec'd out because it's the maximum.
Yeah.
It's not capping anything, that it's allowing the full range that we can start looking at, but it's definitely not a commitment.
No, it's gonna let us know what we can and can't
Yes.
do. So that's perfect.
And I think it's critical, including the science, because we know that's something we're clearly lacking. And I don't think we can move forward if we're going to make an investment to even not consider that. So I think it has to be on the table.
Yeah, I mean, the science building, and we talked about this very briefly in our last conversation, it's like, it's going to come due soon anyways.
Absolutely.
And as a bond investor, I will ask you the question, if I were them, like, what are you planning
What are
on
you gonna do?
doing in the future?
Absolutely.
Not to
So,
mention it was a used building.
to begin with, so yeah. It's important that we take a look at.
All right, any further questions, comments, statements? Platforms? All right,
Jordan Ziegler,
yes.
Stacy Barna,
Yes.
Michelle McCray,
Yes.
Deji Akintoi,
Yes,
Brian Ladman,
Yes.
Colleen Preston,
Yes.
and Eugene Cypher.
Make it unanimous.
Unanimous, so moved. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate that. That was awesome. So we look forward to seeing you again. I'm sure we're gonna see lots of you. Before we close, is there anything else that you want to bring up? I know we have something, but anything else that you guys want to comment or say? All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much. The board will recess after this upon vote and go into executive session for a personnel matter. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Stacy Barner.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Great, we'll see you next week at our normal